Welcome. I'm Pamela Riccia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Anna Brown. Hi, Anna.
Hello.
Yay. It's so fun to have you back on the podcast. Many listeners will have heard you answering questions in the Q&A episodes, as well as that episode about parenting that we did. Like, that was over 2 years ago now.
Yeah, in the beginning, yeah.
But I realized that they haven't heard about your unschooling journey in any organized detail. So I'm very excited to dive into that today. So to get us started, just give us a little introduction to you and your family.
Sure. So I am married to David, and we've been together for over 30 years, and we've lived up and down the East Coast, and just recently, a few months ago, moved back to Virginia, which is the state where we both grew up. We have 2 daughters. They are 18 and 20. And our oldest moved out at the beginning of this year. We miss her terribly, but I love that she's doing her own thing. That makes it easy. And actually, that's something I'll talk about later, too. Our 18-year-old decided to move to Virginia with us while she's figuring out what her next steps are. And we have some traveling things coming up. And so she's excited about that. And my mom is actually also currently living with us for the first time, and she's going to be moving to her own place in a couple months. But we're really enjoying this time with her. And, you know, it's such a time of transition for all of us, but it's been really interesting to kind of just, you know, I love that focus on family and connections and our relationships. And so that's really helped us with kind of this tumultuous transitional time. We have always unschooled, and we are a family of people who enjoy just pursuing lots of different interests. My husband is actually big time into cycling. That takes up a lot of his time. But I like to do all the things, as Pam knows. I love learning new things. I love just the puzzle of it, the intellectual curiosity, all of those things that new things bring. And I mean, run the gamut from farming to technology to anything. Right now I'm sculling, like sweep rowing and sculling in the big long boats like you see on the Olympics. So we just started that. That's been a lot of fun. You know, I think that unschooling was such a great fit with us because of that, because we really just all are kind of excited about exploring the world and doing things and that kind of thing. So I love the freedom that it gave us. So it's been a really wonderful journey over these past 20 years.
I love that feeling too, right? It's like, you know, when you see the thing and the next thing. And I find for me anyway, that it's always like a step ahead, right? You're just finally kind of settling in, and like there's something else. There's something else. It's like, oh, this. And it's amazing. All the, like you said, they don't have to be like related in an easy sense anyway. You know what? When you look back, though, you kind of see the thread, don't you? Oh, that's why that was really interesting to me.
Yeah. All the time. I love that thread. And the holes, you know, the rabbit holes that lead you to all these different things that seem to not be connected, but really there is this connected path.
Yeah. And I mean that, like you said, that's a really important piece of unschooling. I think even for the parents, because you're living that curious and learning lifestyle with your children. Like they see you doing it. This isn't something just for kids.
Right.
You know, where you're kind of sitting back and waiting for them to be inspired, waiting for them to be curious, right?
Exactly. And I think that piece of it, when you don't have that piece, when you're just looking at it as this maybe kind of educational model for your children, you're missing a big piece. And not only that, but I think that's where people maybe get caught up because they're stumbling because they're just focused on the child in front of them. Instead, if they were just exploring and living and doing life, then everybody starts joining in that together. And so you're not just stuck on these places that people get stuck on. But what about the this? What about the that? No, you're learning, you're doing, you're seeing it in action every single day. So I think that probably is an important piece that maybe doesn't get talked about enough, to pursue your own interests together as a family. You know?
I know. And it takes so much pressure off the child too at that point too, right? Because we're just like so focused on what are they doing next? What should I be bringing them? And I guess it's hard, especially at the beginning, because if you tell people, oh, pursue your interests, do your things, then
Right.
they take
No.
that as, oh, I'm going to, kind of be hands off. I'm going to do my thing here. The kids going to do their thing there. And we all go about living our separate lives. So it's that whole piece of talking about living connected with each other,
Yes,
right?
and that's it. That's that connected piece because, my kids help me along that journey. It's not a separate activity necessarily, even if it's something I'm doing that maybe they're not learning the guitar and I'm learning the guitar. They're singing the songs with me. They're right there with me. They're seeing me struggle too, which I think is important because, sometimes I noticed with my kids and with friends' kids too, we have this idea that adults know everything and everything comes so easy to them. So I loved learning together. Those weren't separate activities. That was us each learning and picking up different things and struggling and practicing or whatever the thing might be. And so then it just I don't know, it just kind of makes more sense, I think, to everybody. But yeah, definitely not saying go off to, and leave your kids.
Yeah,
But
no.
be involved, be excited about the world, be interested.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you said, it doesn't have to be something that you're literally doing together, but you're all like learning side by side and doing things side by side. And sometimes things go well, sometimes, they're more of a challenge, and just seeing, because then they can see that in their own lives. It's like, oh yeah, I remember when mom ran into this kind of an issue and what she did with it. And maybe that comes up in conversation, maybe it's just their own internal processing,
Right, right.
but because you're living together side by side chatting about things, if they want to bounce it off of you, if they want to a little bit more help processing it, seeing connections, they've got the opportunity often to bring that
Right.
out, right?
And I think the connections we were talking about with the threads and the other things, the connections maybe become a little bit more clear to everybody, and that building of skills. I think one of the things that school does that I don't love is how it segregates learning.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not connected. And I think what unschooling does a great job of doing is you really see, okay, so this learning that we've done over here, oh my gosh, how that helped us get over here. And then it helped us find this thing. And then it helped us with this skill over here that we didn't even know we needed. And so I think that helps build confidence to try new things and to explore out in the world because you see how it all fits together. It's not, you don't have to just do this in little segmented parts.
And I think that's especially, when you first start unschooling, that first year or handful of years is gaining that experience, seeing that happen with
Right.
yourself and with your kids. It's like, now I get how this works, right? Rather than just staring at your child and waiting
Right.
for them to all of a sudden display all the stuff that we're talking about. No, that thriving environment is for the family. It's not just for the kids. It's such a huge. Okay, so I'm curious to hear about how you actually discovered unschooling and what your kind of move, what the decision kind of looked like to not send your kids to school.
Sure. So basically, like I said, we've always unschooled. And I have told this story before, so people are going to have heard it, but I'm going to say it again just for anyone who hasn't. And because this is a story, like this is literally how it happened. So my oldest daughter had a lot of medical issues after her birth, and they were not sure that she would survive. And when it became certain that she would survive, at least to get out of the hospital and to come home with us, they had a lot of, really dire predictions, and she's never going to walk, she's never going to talk. But thankfully, she did not get those memos and went on to speak very early. Physical things were harder for her at times, but she always found a way. And it was actually beautiful and amazing to see her find her way around those pieces too. But so early on, she was about age 3 and she was into bones. And so I bought a 5th grade textbook to answer her questions. And when we opened it up, it said thigh bone. And she already at that point knew it was femur. And she's like, this book is not right. It's not right. I said, gosh, they're teaching 5th graders, that there's the thigh bone. So I ended up having to find this college level anatomy text that was this massive tome of, pages and flip things. To get the questions answered, like to the depth and level that she was looking for. And so around the same time, we were at a playground near our house, and she was playing on the slide, this kind of elevated thing. And I was down, but could see and was right there. And she pointed to this little boy in front of her, to his chest, and she said, "That's your sternum." And he looked down and he said, "No, that's a triceratops." And because he had a picture on his shirt. And so this heated argument ensued because, oh my gosh, she's very, no, this is your sternum and it's connected to your blah, blah, blah. And she's going, and he's like, "You don't know your dinosaurs, lady," this kind of thing. And so it was really, anyway, we got through that and got them all to play set and went home. But that day I was like, okay, kindergarten isn't going to work for this child. So we're still 2 years away from kindergarten at this point. And she has no interest. I mean, she had already long knew colors, numbers, letters, things like that. And I just thought, what is she going to do in that environment? Like, that's not going to be an environment that feels good to her. So that I had to kind of sit with that for a minute. Like, okay, so what do we do then? Like, what does that look like? Because I had been working full time prior to having her. And really in the beginning, before she was born, I thought, oh, I'll do the 6 or 8 weeks and then I'll go back to working full time in corporate America or whatever you're doing at the time. And, we'll do this or that or private school or whatever school. But then after all of her medical issues, a lot of things changed for me, emotionally and just, spiritually, and all kinds of things that I knew that I wanted to be with her and to spend this time with her. And so, then I was like, okay, well, I guess I resigned myself to homeschooling at that point. And I found classical methods, and I think it was like The Well-Trained Mind or something like that, that book from a long time ago. And I say resign because I really didn't want to be a teacher. Like, that idea was not appealing to me. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh, okay, but I can do it. I'm so grateful she's here. And I'm so grateful, that is this brilliant mind and all of these things. But then I found John Holt, and I really don't even know how. I feel like it might have been at the library, but I came across, I think the first one I read was Learning All the Time. So it's a pretty small book of his. And oh my gosh, as soon as I read it, I was like, this is her, Afton, this is her. Like, oh my gosh, like this is my child. And so it just spoke to me so instantly that, like, this is how we learn. Like, I loved his understanding. As humans, we really do like to kind of dig deep into things we're interested in, and we learn with all these different connections, and that it's a truly natural process. And I could see it. He talks about observe your child. And I could see this with her. Here we were 3 years in, she's still very young, but look at what she's learned, in these 3 years. And even, she was advanced or whatever than some, but any 3-year-old, language, acquisition, all of these different things, relationship things, all kinds of stuff that they've learned up to this point without formal schooling, and so. And I think maybe it was easier with her because she did have a lot of this kind of academic knowledge that she had already learned at 3 years old. And so I was like, why would I send her to a place that isn't going to serve her, And so I so grateful, to have found that book at that time, because it also really spoke to how I learned, and how I could see things with my husband. And so I just thought, this is the natural process. I want to see how that plays out. And we really never looked back from that point.
So, that almost describes the next question, which was, how did you develop trust in unschooling? Like, from that intellectual understanding to, like, knowing that it was really going to work. So was that really the process of reading John Holt, talking about that as theory, and then observing it in your husband and your daughter?
Exactly. I feel like it was just that process of watching, and so I stepped back because I think, especially when I first made that decision about, okay, well, we're probably going to need to homeschool, and I'm talking to David about it, I kind of got in my head, this is this intellectual pursuit. And then I think that really stopped me to
Hmm.
step back and let's just observe where we are. Let's look at who she is and how she's learning and how she's interacting with the world. And I knew that I needed to stay out of the way of that. And that's not a hands-off thing. It's facilitating. I'm there. I'm even anticipating some things, but really just listening to her. I don't need to, because if you look at something like a classical education, I mean, it's very specific, really specific. If you've never seen it, you have to write sentences and you're learning about this Greek thing or this, that, and all those things are interesting. It's not that they're not, but it's coming from me. And what I found, of course, over the years is that she learned about all of that and more because she was interested in it. So it really just became stepping back to stay out of her way, but being right there to facilitate and to kind of follow those leads and to see, because I feel like, again, it's such a natural process. When we have an interest or need to know something, we ask questions.
Hmm.
We read a book. We look it up on the internet. We find mentors. We explore. We just put our hands in and start doing it. We dive deep until we have our curiosity satisfied for that thing. Now, it may be a lifelong love that we've stumbled upon, or it may just be we want to do this for a while and then we want to move on. So I guess I really just, that observation and spending that time stepping back, I was just like, wow, I want this natural instinct to lead the way. I want to see how this unfolds. And I mean, because I am kind of that scientific left brain mind too, I mean, I was fascinated by this because, I did well in school. School was, pretty easy for me. And I, enjoyed it a lot more than my husband. It was fine, but I was like, wow, so they're going to learn to read without reading lessons. They're going to learn math without, what is this going to look like? And I was curious and really didn't know, but they did. I saw it every day, every year, all the learning, these complex things that people think have to be sitting in a seat and, drill, 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 drill. I'm like, no, they didn't do any of that. They just learned and talked and explored and answered questions and found the answers when I didn't know them and all of that together. And I found that fascinating on so many levels, as a personal relationship with them, but also just as observing how as humans we learn and what kind of implications that can have for us.
I love how you were so ready for that because, when you talked about how you were really uncomfortable with the idea of homeschooling, because as you looked in it, like you said, it was really about you having to jump in and take control now,
Yeah.
right? So that was already feeling just uncomfortable, even though you didn't know what else there was till you came
Right.
across it. That's really cool. And yeah, we'll get into how fun, how fun it is to watch them.
Yes, for sure.
So let's see, was there any particular part of that journey, the move to unschooling, that was a bit more challenging? Like you could see the learning, like you said, and you saw the learning that she was doing all the time. Was there any other particular aspect that was a little bit harder for you to move through?
I wouldn't say that I had any kind of challenges moving to unschooling, but there were hard parts for me. So I'll just talk about, pieces of
Hmm.
that. One of the things for me was putting myself out there to help facilitate my child because I'm an introvert. Going up to strangers and, trying to find mentors and doing those kind of things was not always easy for me. And what's funny is for my oldest, especially, she has no problem talking to anyone. And so, oh my gosh, she taught me so much about just people like to talk to you about the things they love, and she would just start talking to them and they would just be so excited that she was interested. And that really helped me, but that was hard. And I struggled with that a lot because the way I learn is typically read a book or look it up or do, but she really liked having people who were doing it, things like that. And so, that really stretched me. We were fortunate to have a thriving homeschool community in Charlotte where my girls grew up. Not always a lot of unschoolers, but enough interest-based activities that, that created this vibrant community. But still at times, finding connections can be tough. And I think that's another area where I had to do a lot of work. And I don't know if that's easier with school. I feel like school brings its own set of challenges, but I know that I did really have to work to find and keep connections into our community, to create community. I think that in the end, as I'm looking back now, at that time, our lives are so enriched by the diversity of the friends that we had and our unschooling journey, which are friends all over the world. It's made all of that work well worth it, but I definitely had to stretch myself over the years to keep creating community, traveling long distances, putting myself out there, organizing groups, which is something I would never have thought I would do, driving. Oh my gosh, the hundreds of thousands of miles that I drive our cars. People are like, how do you put so many miles in your car? And I'm like, we are driving to see things, meet people, do things, all of this. And because a lot of our friends were all over the place, we travel to see them too. And these are things I didn't know that I could do, but I feel fortunate that I pushed through some of those, kind of initial things that were holding me back to create this amazing life, for them. So while unschooling itself was never really a problem for me, like the philosophy or that idea of it, in execution, there were definitely areas that stretched me and kept me growing the whole time.
Well, I really, really love that one because, I don't think about that often, but it's absolutely true. And, I found it easier to stretch myself for my kids.
Yes.
I was like, okay, it was that last little push. It's like, this is for them. Sure, I'll ask. Sure, I'll phone. Like when I would have, if it was, reaching out for something for myself, I probably would have put it off, eventually done it. But for them, it's like, okay, sure, I can do that. Just a little observation. But absolutely. I mean, I would never thought I'd have hosted a conference. Right. And that was part of just trying to, build community, trying to find people local to us because we were driving down to the States every year and loved the people that we met there. And then it's like, hey, we met them through a conference. What if we, if I put one on up here, let's see who shows up that way, trying to just build that community, the connections, and absolutely not being afraid to drive and go places. Right.
And I think that's part of what we were talking about before too. Like that's how it's all of us growing. It's not just about the kids or just about ever. We're all growing and we're all, creating opportunities because you're creating opportunities for your kids, but it's also creating connections for you and it's building different parts of a business and things that you didn't even probably foresee way back then, that have come to pass now. So again, but there's that thread that's connecting them all along the way. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And just to say for some people who are like, oh, might be worried my child doesn't like to go out, doesn't like to meet it. Yeah, it's not even really about that. It's still because my eldest wasn't a big one for going. He went to conferences a few times and then he stayed home. He's like, yeah, you know what? I prefer here. But he was still finding those connections, those human connections, but he was finding them in a different way. So it was still facilitating him and his online access and his making sure he had the computers, the software, the whatever to find connections the way he wanted to have connections.
Right. And that, that we had the same thing happen too. And actually my youngest, does enjoy seeing friends, but she does have a big, like games are really important to her, online gaming. And so, another area stretch, I'm creating servers for Minecraft and I'm doing all these things that I'm just like looking at YouTube and thank goodness that YouTube like walks you through the steps, but it's all those things. And again, I wouldn't say I enjoyed the process for the most part, but it is stretching, it's like, okay, I didn't know I was going to be learning this today or doing whatever, but again, it's those connections because all those skills that, we learn in other things we put, and I'm like, okay, I can do a server. This is similar to other things and different in this way. And so, then it helped her create these lifetime relationships. Yeah. I mean, again, all of these years later that we're still close to from all over the world. So I love that.
I know. I mean, for me too, that was the biggest thing was being open to stretching my comfort zones. And it was doing the work to do it. It wasn't like, oh, I got to do this because my kid wants me to do this and I'm unschooling. So this is an expectation on me. No, to
No.
do the work to process, to understand why you're choosing to do it, because it's still always, 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 always a choice, right? And to
Always.
get to the point that you're literally personally choosing it for a reason
Right.
makes all the difference in the world, doesn't it?
All the difference in the world. And then you see it for kind of the fun growth and stretching that it is versus this drudgery or this have to or whatever, because I don't believe in have tos. Everything's a choice. And I think it's so powerful to understand that.
Yeah, it's so worth the time to get to that place where you take the time to realize why you're choosing to do these things, because then you can, the whole attitude and energy that you bring to it. I mean, imagine you're working on that server and you come with frustrated energy and you're like, okay, here, it's done. And then you're like, you run off to something else and then something goes wrong. They don't want to come and ask you,
Right. Right.
right? Because they're like, oh, she was already frustrated here. We don't want to bug her, because everybody's trying to be nice to each other for the most part, for most days, right? So you're cutting off communication and connection with them if you don't get to the place first of understanding why you want to choose to do this.
Right.
Whether it's for yourself or things for your kids or whatever, because even when it's something for yourself, and you choose to dive into it, then you're more excited and more apt to share with the people around you and with your kids. It's like, oh, hey, I did this and this happened. And it's just a way that your energy and your attitude becomes about sharing and connecting rather than drudgery and having to get through this and moving on, right?
Right.
That's so cool.
Yes.
So, what about David? What was David's journey to unschooling like?
So it's so funny. So David is honestly a natural born unschooler, and I had no idea, and he wouldn't have known the word at all before all this. But he is. It's just how he lives his life. He never liked school. He just didn't fit into their box. But he's this super smart guy, and we went to college together, and in college, he did do did better and he liked it, but I think it's because it was interest based.
Mm-hmm.
He was then finally able to do something that was interesting to him and that was kind of at a level that kept his interest. And so then he had a career that he enjoyed until some things changed with that, and he ended up retiring in his mid-30s. But he's always helped the rest of us to enjoy the moments, and just do the things we love. Like, he is the one that really guides that part of our family. And he has always prioritized his relationship with the girls and with me. And like that decision to retire early, we had a lot of number crunching to do and a lot of, can we make this happen? And what would that be? But for him, he was like, but we won't ever get this time back with the girls. Like, if I can be here now with the girls and then we try to do something else later when they're older, and I just love that. Like, he's not a fear-based person at all. He's like, we'll figure it out then and we'll figure it out, whatever. But what was most important to him is to not lose that time. And so I love that about him, because he keeps me lighter when it comes to things like that. And helps me. So yeah, could not have asked for a better partner for this journey, because I know that some people struggle with that. And I wonder too, with some of that, if it's, and we talk about it when we talk to people that are struggling, is, I think that person's probably hurting and not feeling heard and maybe not feeling satisfied in where they are in their life. So if we can help them get there too, again, it's that whole family working together, mm-hmm. that can help that journey be a little bit smoother.
And I think you mentioned that he's not fear-based in a lot of his thinking. And I think that can be a real big challenge, because, that's what society kind of drums into our head. If you don't do this, this will happen, this can go wrong, So we're always so used to worrying about the things that might go wrong someday, right? Rather than being in the moment.
I know. And he is so great at being in the moment, really much better than I am. I've gotten better over the years, but he's really led the way with that. I tend to be a planner. I'm not really a worrier necessarily, but in some ways planning is kind of the same. I mean, if you, depending on how you approach it. And so he's just like, you know what, it's going to work out. We'll figure it out. We'll do. And so I love that. So we kind of balance each other because I'm still planning a little bit and he's still flying by the seat of his pants, but it's good. So
You know what I found over the years? I eventually found, because I'm a planner too. I love planning.
yeah,
But what ended up work for me mostly is planning, but then being able to release what actually
yeah,
happens, right?
yeah,
So for me, I found the love of, like planning like multiple kind of options,
yeah,
and then getting to the place where it's like, oh, now we'll see what happens.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay, you have a website, choosingconnection.com, which is home to some great articles that you have written about consensual living. Now, I was hoping you could share how your interest in consensual living developed and how that kind of evolved over the years alongside unschooling.
Sure. So consensual living, like the term, I coined a long time ago when someone asked me to speak at a conference about a philosophy that we've been talking about online. So when the girls were little, I was big into the online communities of, parenting and unschooling and
Mhm.
different things. And so that's kind of where that came from. And it really developed out of a necessity for me personally. So I had practiced attachment parenting with my girls. So think co-sleeping, baby wearing, extended nursing, all that kind of stuff. And it made so much sense to me to respect and honor these, amazing beings that were entrusted to me. But what didn't make sense was when I saw people suddenly become authoritarian and directive as soon as their child reached 4 or 5, and especially amped up at school age.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, wait a minute. Weren't we all just at the group talking about how great it is to follow their cues and listen to their, things? And so I felt really disenfranchised by that. Like I thought, why? I don't understand. And what I saw is the things that, we began talking about: finding agreeable solutions, assuming positive intent, working together, communicating, how all of those things applied not just to my relationship with children, but to all of my relationships and to like all interactions. And that intrigued me because, here's me liking new things and puzzles and how does it all fit together? How we could shape the world by how we related to one another. I just thought, gosh, that's so powerful. And it's this opportunity that we're missing. And so out of those discoveries and ideas, this kind of philosophy of interacting was born and grew. And my friend Pat and I managed groups that talked about the principles and how they could be applied in all our interactions and how powerful it was to trust and work together. And I think that for me then and for me now, how it reaches beyond, unschooling and parenting and whatever is still fascinating to me. It isn't something I really talk about as much anymore, but it's still very much how I live my life. It colors all of my relationships and really all of my interactions. And a few years ago, when I had to find a place to park those articles, I chose the name Choosing Connections because over the years, you asked about the evolution. I feel like that's what I realized it all boiled down to, was choosing to connect with that person in front of you. Whatever your relationship to them is, it's choosing to find that human connection. And so when we focus on and choose connection, so many things become easier. And I love how, again, that has our power to shape our world, and back when consensual living was kind of blowing up and people were talking about it, I was on a radio show, and Alan Combs, who has actually passed away, but it was so funny because he got it. Like, he's like, the callers were like, you're terrible and your kids are going to do whatever. And, that stuff doesn't bother me at all. So I'm just like laughing about that with him. And he's like, I'm thinking maybe if governments were doing what you're talking about, like, we'd have a different world. And I'm like, yes, you get it. Because that's the thing. Like, if we could hear one another, if we could talk to one another instead of posturing and fear and authority and all of these things, wow, it just changed everything. So it still is something that's near and dear to me, even though I don't do a lot with it, except just in my personal life now.
Yeah, living it.
Yeah.
And that's I mean, it's huge, and it's such a big piece. And I feel like that was something that for me I learned from watching my kids, right? And from engaging with my kids and from realizing how that connection with them was, like you said, the foundation. Everything blossomed from that. Everything, when that was strong, everything just went better, right? It felt better. I mean, it's not like even when things went wrong, it went better.
Right,
Like the
right.
resolution went more smoothly. You know, we could talk more about it. We could even like understand what the other person was saying better because we had that connection, right?
That foundation of
Yeah,
connection, to build upon. Yeah.
exactly. And I too, like, you know, as you described it, I found the same thing, how that bubbled out into all relationships, all interactions with other people. And so I just ended up kind of loving it through the view of the hero's journey. But it's, you know, it's the same
It is.
principles, right?
Yeah, it is.
Right. That's beautiful. And like you were saying, how when you're out and about in the world, like even now as I'm, you know, chatting with people, and you find, don't you find, like they really enjoy having a conversation with you because you just see them like
Yeah.
relax and just start sharing from their heart, I guess is you know, they start
I think
sharing their real selves.
we all want to be heard, and that's something we used to say a lot back in the groups. But it's like everybody wants to be heard, even that 2-year-old, even that mailman, even that person, whatever. We just want to be heard, and it's so simple to just take a step back and really listen, and then have a true conversation. And it's just something that we kind of stay in our heads and move past and don't give an opportunity. And it is, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and that ties into the whole ethos of busyness,
Yes.
I think too, right? Which is something that so often we work through with unschooling because our children, and then we realize for us too, I had no clue the value of just time to be,
Right.
right? Versus doing. The value of that time to just be, let your subconscious, whatever process, you know, that's, and then now we're talking about learning connections, right?
Yeah.
Learning connections, relationship connections, all those connections need time. You have to give them that bit of time to bubble up, and life is just so much fuller and more enjoyable all at the same time, isn't it?
Yes, I know, I love that.
Boom, boom. I'm just making connections here. I'm like, just let me think about that for a
I
second.
know, it really is amazing.
It really, really is. Okay, so can you share some tips for moving from conventional parenting towards creating that climate of consensual living?
Well, I think, like we've just said, I mean, one of the most simple things to keep in the forefront of all decisions is connection. Is what I'm about to do going to enhance my connection with my child or harm it? And that quick little litmus test can kind of guide the way through a lot of, rocky areas. Some of the things we've talked about, assuming positive intent, listening, validating, those are tools that we've talked about on other shows and different things. All of those tools can help so much. But really, it's having conversations, it's having communicating, time when you can communicate. It's having that underlying connection, that foundation that allows those conversations to feel comfortable and to feel safe for everyone. And I think it's that simple. Again, people just want to feel heard. They want to be in relationship. And you touched on this a little bit earlier, and it reminded me so much. I think sometimes as a society, we think that children are kind of out to thwart and do or whatever, but children actually want to live in community. It's if you watch and observe them, they want to know what you're doing and how do I do it too, and how do I fit into this group, and how do I, like, that's just a natural human instinct. And so if we can tap into that by connecting and listening and hearing and kind of protecting that piece, oh my gosh, it does create this foundation that makes everything so much easier. And I feel like because of that, working together really comes naturally. And once you quiet the noise from the outside voices or these, way it's supposed to be or way people think it's going to be, this fear and authority and deficit-based focus that we have a lot through schools and really just through our whole society, when you can kind of set that aside and focus back on the people in front of you, then I think you just see, okay, this isn't so hard. We can have a conversation. We can do this. It's just when you've got all this stuff going on back here that I think it gets a little bit tough. And I think, parents really get in their heads a lot. And I think that makes it more complicated than it needs to be,
That was that piece that just jumped out of me when you said when they get in their heads a lot. Something that I see is I remember feeling it so much, being worried sometimes to open that connection, like to take another step and connect, because I don't know if it's going to go well.
Right.
As in, are they going to like what I suggest? Right. Am I getting in the way? And as even, when things are going well, it's like, I don't want to ruin this, so that fear, that getting in our head, that stops us for a moment. And it was an attachment parenting book that I think we talked about last year or something. But anyway, it talks about how when you're connecting with another person and or a child, that so often what they say, like 50% of our interactions aren't going to go as expected. Sure. That was kind of their average, but that the most important piece was the reconnecting piece.
Yeah.
So, if you were reconnecting, it wasn't a big deal because, that's life, who knows? It's that curiosity about the moment, how is this going to go? Unless you're, but you're still observing them, and if you can tell that it's more annoying than anything, it's like, okay, those aren't the good times to do it. But, it's all back to that connection, that relationship, that being together with each other.
That's the thing, the working together, because I think parents often put a lot of pressure on themselves to have all the answers.
Do it right. Yeah.
It isn't necessary. Our children have so much to offer. They have so many great ideas, and they're carrying around a lot less baggage than we are. So it's like, tap into that connection. And I feel like the bumpy parts can smooth out so much faster. But I think when we're in our head and we're thinking, I'm supposed to know how this is to solve this, I'm supposed to fix this, it's not supposed to be this way. I mean, those are just not helpful words. Like, it's just not a helpful energy place to be. But instead, if you can just kind of come honestly, like, I don't know what to do here, but I love you guys. And where should we go next? Like, how do we figure out how to move on from whatever this conflict is or whatever this problem is? What a different set of energy than coming in with this, okay, I'm going to fix this, and I better do it, and I hope it's going to work. And,
yeah, I know. So many questions too. And I can so empathize with them, because I remember that feeling of, I need to figure this out. What do I think would be a good plan? And then I'll go talk to them.
Right.
But no. Because like you said, they have such a wonderful perspective to bring. And then I'm not going in with an agenda. Even if it's like buried in my head, it's still like an attitude. I'm still like trying to get us there if I think I know what a good answer is.
And they sniff that out in a heartbeat, and they'll react to it, and defend and put up walls, as opposed to when you can really go in and just say, let's see, here's what I'm thinking. What are you thinking? Then suddenly these ideas pour out, and some of them will work and some of them will bounce off the floor and some of them are whatever. But I think it's, that agenda piece is, let that go. Let that set outcome go, because again, they're going to be so much more creative, and you're all going to be more creative when you're doing it together with this open curiosity, this open mind.
Yeah. And I think that's a big piece of deschooling is we really feel like we need to control things. And when we're like, oh, we don't even realize that it's really about control at its root, when we're like, oh, my child's having this problem and I want to figure out how to help them. We really think we're trying to help them, but we're doing it without them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Over the years,
in a lot of ways. Sorry. No, control rears its head in a lot of ways.
I know. It's amazing. That's one of the things I loved about the revelations
Yeah.
of deschooling, and they still hit me. Like I've
Oh,
had
yeah.
one or two here already. But it is everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's always, I always talk about, uh, I think I mentioned it recently on a podcast that I just always remind myself to be open and curious over and over again, because it's so easy to get pulled in, right? And
Yeah.
to just think for myself and get stuck in my head.
Yes.
But when I'm open, things work out so much more easily because I'm bringing things in. I have just so much more to choose from. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And so many times, especially with the kids, it was ideas or things that honestly just weren't even on my radar,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
until they brought it up and I'm like, hey, yeah, that could work. That makes sense, or, and just seeing them work it out. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't have thought that, but they like it. So that's good, and so it just keeps, I don't know. Yeah, I love that piece.
Yeah, and being comfortable with what they come up with.
Yeah.
Like if it wasn't my plan, or if it wouldn't be the way I would, the
Maybe
direction I
I can
go,
do
or
it
whether I
fair
think
or
it's
whatever,
fair,
yeah.
or
Well,
yeah, exactly. Because they're learning from the experience too. This is what they think is going to work for them moving forward. So
yeah.
why not help them move forward to that with that? Because then they're going to learn from that. They're going to learn from that, from how they were thinking and analyzing the situation. They
Right.
may move forward and the next day think, oh no, that doesn't feel right to me anymore,
Right. Right.
because look, I think I lost out on that dealio.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'll bring it
But
up
that's
again.
part of it, though. That's part of the learning.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what they'll take in, rather than if I, kind of said, well, I think this would work. And even if I talked to them and kind of got their buy-in, it was my
Well,
idea.
not the
So
same.
they don't learn as much from it moving forward as well, I don't think. Right? Because
No,
then
no.
if it doesn't work out, it's my fault. And not that I'm worried about the
Right.
blame, but they're not processing it that way. They're not thinking about it,
But
because
right,
they
but
can
they're
just say
not,
it's
and
you.
they feel a little bit stuck. Like we create this dynamic where this authority, be it parent or whoever's going to solve this problem, versus looking inside and using a more collaborative approach. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think again, when they find out the next day, well, this doesn't feel great. There's no negative piece associated with that. We were able to just, okay, well, hell, let's try something different, or let's
Yeah.
do something else. It wasn't this, you're supposed to do it this way, it's failed, it's wrong, it's bad. It just became this, again, this open curiosity. Okay, well, that didn't feel great anymore, so what could we do now? But there was still this kind of open communication that was fostered all through that process, which I loved.
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't nailing somebody to,
Right.
well, this is what you chose.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
now
That's
you
really
got to live with that.
yeah.
Okay, now we'll move on to the next question. So over the years, I have heard you talk a few times about the importance of the stories that we tell ourselves. And I love it every time you talk about it, because we think, even when we talk about the stories we tell ourselves, we think, oh, it's just in our head, what's the big deal? But it really, really can be a big deal, can't it?
Yeah, it's such a big deal. I think we often don't realize the power that we have to control our own narrative. We get caught up in how other people are telling our stories. But when we step in and begin to write our own story, and a story that focuses on connection, growth, joy, it changes things. It changes how we see ourselves. It changes how others see us too. It changes what we attract into our life. I've had plenty of difficult things happen to me throughout my life, but all of them, in all of those times, there were bright moments, moments of joy, moments of connection, moments of growth for sure. And as I focus my gratitude there, it creates a story that builds me up instead of a story that weighs me down. So I'm not carrying the weight of the tragic times or the difficult times. I'm carrying this built up of, you know what, I survived that, I learned it, and I found things in it that I can smile about, or things, or even if it's a connection with a friend that helped me through that time, or whatever that is. I'd much rather focus on that connection with that friend that got me through that tough time than carry the weight of that tough time for the rest of my life. Because which one serves me more? Thinking I'm loved by this person serves me more than, staying back at this time. And it's just so powerful, because I get to decide who I am, how I react to things, how I move through the world. Like that's what I can control. When we talk about control, a lot of times we're trying to control other people
Others.
and all of that. It's like, set that aside. But what I can control is who I am, how I react to things, and how I move through this world. And so I always bring myself back to that piece. And I think for some, that's a real revelation because they feel controlled by outside forces and all of these other pieces. And I think it's really powerful to kind of turn that around. And so, I would, related to that, I would just say to people, be aware of your words, be aware of how you describe things, and watch and observe and kind of step back and see how little shifts in language can change the energy of a situation and how you feel about yourself and how you feel about what's going on around you. I think that's just such a simple tool that we have that's at our disposal in all situations. Because I think when something, difficult happens, we tend to feel off kilter, like everything's happening to us. It's happening to us. Excuse me. But when I take control of that narrative for myself in the midst of those difficult situations, it transforms them, and it doesn't add weight to me. I can still see that, but I can then get back to open and curious because I'm checking in with myself. I'm telling this story like this part is hard for me, but look at these other things. Look at this other piece that I enjoy. Look at how I can find this. Look at how I can grow and change from this. So just our words are very powerful. And I think we don't, even when so if we have unschoolers, for example, that maybe are very cautious about how the words they say to their children can sometimes say really harsh words to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that in our summit group, and I think, oh my gosh, the language they're using to talk about themselves is so hurtful, and I think that if we could just be more gentle around that and really understand, how powerful that language is when we give words to who we are, that really changes things. So I think it's so powerful, words and story and all of that.
Maybe it helps to think of trying to see ourselves through the same lens that we look at our children.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I've never thought of it that way, but that may be a way for people to maybe just start, because it's amazing. And I think your point about how when we're apt to do that and get down on ourselves and feel that weight when we feel things are out of control, right? When we have no control over the situation. But yeah, when it's just in the way you frame it, right? And it's in the way you talk to yourself about it.
Yes.
You can find it's completely under your control, the way you see things.
Yes.
And every step that you take, every reaction and action
and everything you choose to focus on, and so in difficult times for me, because I'm very connected to nature, like that's really important to me, even in a very difficult time, I can still see a sunset and a breeze through a tree and things like that. And it sounds simple and maybe it sounds silly even, but for me, those things ground me because the sun's still rising and setting, the breeze is still blowing, the trees are still there. And everything will pass. Like there's just a longer view. And so it just helps me to kind of not latch on to that kind of heavy darkness, whatever that is that's happening to me. And I'm able to step back and still see it because I'm still going to have to move through it. I'm still going to have to deal with it. And I may be crying about it or I may be upset about it or whatever, and that's okay. But when I can even shift my focus for just a moment to something beautiful, be it my child or my husband or a tree or a leaf or whatever it is, just that moment, then that, those moments build and then you're moving through. And so I just think that is just a powerful tool we have at our disposal, that we can do anywhere and anytime.
Yeah. And I think you use the word grounded, and I think that is such a useful image, whatever it is that you see grounded, because we're stuck in the spin, right? In the fear and the spin and the tunnel vision. And if you can find something that helps you ground for a moment, that helps that stop, even just for a second. And then you can see more clearly, right?
Exactly. And you can start building on that. Even if it's just a moment, then you have something to build on that's different from this fear place, this scary place, whatever this thing is that's happening. And so I feel like try to find those moments where you can, and suddenly you're stringing together more and more, and suddenly you're through that difficult time and you've made it. And so I think it's again just a powerful tool.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I feel pretty good about from our unschooling lives. When I look at my kids now, when things get really challenging, is that I mean, they're absolutely challenging and things are going wrong, whatever, but that they know that there's another side. It's not like, it's not ever the absolute, and it's not the end of the world.
Right.
Right? It's a really hard moment, and maybe we have no clue what the next step's going to be, but we've been through things enough times and have taken that approach so that they know they will figure out some step to take. And it doesn't have to be the right step or anything like that, but
Right.
one little step just to see how things look different now. Right?
Yes,
You're just
absolutely.
learning a
And
little bit more in that moment to make for the next step.
right. And it's funny because I think, like you said a minute ago, find whatever that is for you. And I'm going to share this, but David would laugh, but he's probably not going to see this. So he won't know I share. But so this whole transition and move has been challenging. We didn't know we were going to have to move, and then kind of losing our house and having to move and all this was really kind of crazy. But what works for him is he's like the time machine. And he's like, basically, we can't stop time, Anna. He's like, so it seems like all these scary things we've got to do. He's like, but you know what? We're going to be looking back a month from now and we will have done it. Like, I don't know how, but we're going to have done it.
Yeah.
And so he'll just be like, bloop, bloop, time machine, it's over. We got past it. We moved, we're here, we're done this. And it's silly, and he's just silly, and it's fun, but it's true. Like you said, we know, like, time just moves, and we're going to find a way, and we're going to take a step. And maybe some people might say it's a misstep here, but it's a step. And then we correct over here, and then we do this over here, and we keep moving forward. So staying in a place of like fear and paralysis just isn't helpful. Just knowing, we're going to get through it. We're going to, and when you're nervous about something that's coming up, no, it's going to pass too, and you're going to get through it. You're prepared for it, or whatever it is that you've done and you're ready for. So, I mean, it's just finding those little tools or little mantras that just help we're going to get through this. We always do, and we'll find a way.
Yeah, I love that. I use that trick actually quite a bit. Like that, 3 months from now, looking back. I'm looking forward to the day when I'm gonna, know how all this works.
Right.
I mean, I remember doing that at university.
Yeah.
I would get a textbook, before the course started, and I'd be like, crap. I know at the end of this session, whatever, I'm going to know this stuff. That's really cool. And that was that helped me just, get out of that moment where I was stuck.
Right. That moment of fear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it works out. We get through it. We learn it. We figure it out. And that doesn't mean there's not bumps along the way, but we get through it,
And I think that the other piece I just wanted to mention was you talked about, the step and whether or not it's a misstep, it doesn't matter. And even, thinking of it as a misstep, because that's that judgment piece too, right? And I think we don't realize how deep that goes as well, because a step is a step, and it's only my future self who's choosing whether or not that was, a right step or a wrong step.
Right.
There's no value in that. I made that step, and here's where I'm standing now.
Might be saying, oh, look, that's a misstep. But yeah, shut that noise out, because you're just stepping forward, and you're stepping forward with your best information and what you know, and you're exactly where you need to be, at each step along the journey. So absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's, again, don't even own that language from anyone else, and certainly don't put it on yourself,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. So we talked about comfort zones a little bit earlier. I was just wondering if there was ever an interest or activity that one of your kids wanted to pursue that stretched a comfort zone, and how you move through that.
Yeah. So with my oldest, again, we have a lot in common. We look a lot alike, and we process information a lot the same, but there are definitely areas where we're really different. And there was a time kind of in her, I guess, early teens maybe, where she went through a stage of really a lot of horror, death, darkness, really heavy, heavy stuff. And, I could see she was working through some things, but I also just saw she was enjoying it. But for me personally, I did not like the energy of it. I am sensitive and I take that kind of stuff in, and it hurts my heart to see people hurting or hurting other people. That is really hard for me. And I had to really work hard to be present with her exploration of that and not take it on as my own, and to not tell stories about it, like how it was for her too. So I had to keep my focus on our connection, like where we connected and how I could facilitate her, even if I wasn't participating. And I think that's probably one of the keys, is realizing we all have different interests and we're exploring things for different reasons. None is more or less valid. But we can always be there to support and facilitate someone, whether we understand what they're doing or why they're doing it. Interestingly, with this particular thing, years later, when we talked about that time in her life, I learned how critical it was for her as she was moving through some very big fears that she had. And these were fears she was not verbalizing to me at the time. These were things she was taking in and trying to make sense of. And had I tried to kind of curtail the entrance because I felt like, oh, that's negative, or that's, you don't want to have all this energy or whatever, because that's how it affected me, I think I would have really impacted her ability to move through something that was very important and kind of pivotal in her development, so that she could become comfortable with these things. Like, that was her process of understanding some kind of horrific deaths that she was exposed to and some other things that happened. And so, we each are going to do that differently. And so I'm grateful that I was, even though it was hard for me, able to kind of step back and, let her do that and still support, because she, as we talked about it later, never felt judgment from me about it. Like, she knew it was something that I didn't enjoy. And so she would kind of say, oh, Mom, you're not going to like this one, or you're not going to, like this. But she knew that I still was totally fine, supporting her. And so I was grateful that she had gotten that message, because I wasn't sure that had come through all the time, because it was so hard for me. We can't always see what's going on inside their heads. And actually, no, I'm going to say we never can see what's going on inside their heads. So I think, stop trying to write someone else's story, and like why they're doing something or what they're getting out of it or what they should be doing differently. I think kind of stop that piece, and learn to trust in their journeys and to keep that connection. And again, that's just what has seen us through so many difficult pieces, whether I'm stretching or they're stretching or whatever. I think it's just that connection, as we keep talking about.
Yeah, I was, as you were telling that story, what popped in my mind was trust. And then you threw that in there at the end too, because that's why I think it's so important to really dig into deschooling at the beginning when you're getting there, and really understand what's going on and understand why that connection and trust is so important to develop.
Yeah.
Because you're going to need those tools later, right? To be able to trust when you don't understand why somebody's making these choices or doing these things or has this interest, or whatever, or why they're asking to try this or do this, if it's not something that that you guys are talking about, you still need to trust that if this is something that they want to pursue or need to, whatever, like their choices, trust their choices, right? Because you're there, you're in connection. What they want to talk to you about at the time, if anything, they will. But like you said, to be able to, as much as you can, just not exude that judgment. You
Right.
said later, she said she didn't feel that judgment from you, and she felt that trust. It's okay that they know that this isn't your favorite thing in the world,
Exactly.
because they know you.
I can be honest
Yeah.
about who I am, but I don't have to put that on her. So you need to be like this, because she doesn't. And she didn't, she needed to go through that time. Now that we look back, how important it was for her. But yeah, but I think you can be honest. And I think that maybe is another place people trip up. Well, I don't want to pretend to like that or whatever. I'm like, I know you don't have to do that, but
Yeah.
it's just watch that judgment, make sure that you're okay, with your boundaries, but that you're not putting that on them,
On
that, oh,
someone else.
that's bad for you, or that, oh, that's going to affect you the same way. I think we do that a lot too. So like those moments are really hard for me in films or whatever. But it doesn't affect other people the same way. Like I've just learned this. So like I have a thing about clowns, don't like clowns at all. But everybody loved the new, Stephen King, but
It.
the it. Okay, so they're like, they all loved it. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch it. It's clowns. I'm being silly. I can watch clowns. Oh my gosh, I didn't give a flying flip about the clown. The clown could come sit in the room with me. What I didn't like was that bullying, how hateful the children and the adults were to each other. I walked out. I was like, I'm not watching this. I don't care about the clown. This is what I can't do. And so they know that about me. Like that is who I'm not going to change that piece of them, but they loved it. And so then they could tell me about the movie and what they loved about it later, because I just couldn't watch it. And then I could be excited for them and, oh yeah, that was interesting or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think be honest about yourself, but realize other people aren't taking it in the same way that you are necessarily. And that's kind of an important distinction.
Yeah, I think that's something I love to emphasize, that difference. It's not about putting ourselves
Right.
in the situation that our children are in.
Yeah.
It's about seeing the situation through their eyes. There's such a huge difference.
Huge difference. Huge difference.
Yeah, I love that. Ah, yeah. Okay. All right. Question number 10. We made it to the last question. Looking back, what has been the most valuable outcome from choosing unschooling?
I think it really has to be time because, as I mentioned, we didn't know how much time we would have with my oldest. And really, the truth of the matter is, we don't know how much time we have with anybody. And
Yeah.
some people don't like to think about that, but it's the truth.
Hmm.
I knew early on, because of our experience with her, that I wanted to enjoy every moment. I wanted to be able to live with no regrets, and that if it all ended tomorrow, that I could say we had the most awesome time together, and I'm so grateful. Like that's where I wanted to be, and that's what we did, and that's what we're still doing. I still do it all today, all the time, because we just never know. And so that's what guides my decisions. Am I spending time with the people that I love? Am I doing the things that I enjoy? Like, how does that look? And I feel like unschooling was such a big part of that. It allowed us to build these relationships and visit amazing places and explore these things that we love. And oh my gosh, the magical people we met along the way. I just wouldn't trade a second of it. And I am so grateful for that, just all those things that happened. And sometimes it's hard for people to understand, like, I'm grateful for even the stuff that happened to my oldest, because wow, did it change the trajectory of everything. I
Hmm.
mean, had that not I wouldn't be here today. And so it's just understanding that those are the choices. And I just feel like, oh, unschooling, I'm so grateful. And oh my gosh, it goes by really fast.
I
you know,
know.
time machine, bloop, bloop, it's all
Bloop,
over.
bloop.
um, but even with that, like, so now I'm in this age where, my friends, their kids are getting older and going off, and a lot of them are upset and have this. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I don't feel that at all, honestly, because we have savored every stage. And, we continue to be grateful for the time we have together now, but I'm so excited for them. Like it's just all kind of built to this natural. I don't have regrets about not having time, or, oh, they're going and now we're losing time. It's like, no, we've had so much time, and what a gift that time has been. And I feel like unschooling was a gift, and stepping, it helped us step off a treadmill that we were definitely on before all of this happened. And, it gave us as a family just so much that I will always, always be grateful for.
Oh, I just love that. And too, you hit the nail on the head too with the kids hitting this age, right? And I just feel excitement for them.
Yeah,
You
me
know,
too.
whether they go, they come back,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
staying, they're away for long times, each piece of that
right.
time is a gift. Like Lissy's around here right now. She's off visiting a
Oh,
friend for a few days. And then
yeah,
she'll be back for a few, but that is a fun time. And we'll enjoy it. But yeah, it's not at all any feelings of regret
no,
or sadness or something when
yeah.
they leave and they're doing their things. Yeah, I mean, because the connection's still there, right? They
Oh,
don't need to
sure.
be
Yeah,
physically with us
yeah,
for that connection. I don't need to talk to them every day for that
no,
connection, to stay and thrive and be strong. There's no expectation on that
right.
connection. But when one of us reaches out, the other
We're
one's
there.
there. Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. And yeah, the whole idea of time. It's such a huge component, isn't it? It's like it's it.
Yeah.
That's the
And
root.
it's that you talked about with the busyness piece too. I think
Mhm.
as a society, we use time in a way that is different, than the way we do with unschooling, where we do our days for so many years unfolded, we just would wake up and unfold. And I think that's really a foreign concept to a lot of people. And I think that is a beautiful gift because it's helped me develop and grow as a person into that space of being able to openly trust and be curious because of that time and unfolding versus when you're busy, 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 busy. There's just no time for that. So yeah, time is an interesting topic.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a whole stage around time in the hero's journey and in the unschooling journey. That's like one of my favorite stages, like to write about and to think about. Anyway, yeah, I won't get it, but I mean that whole thing. We were talking about how there will always be that with light at the end of the tunnel, or that you can
Yes.
get through things. That
Right.
that life still follows the down moments, the
Yes.
good moments. Time flows. Anyway.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes, it's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for speaking
Oh,
with me today, Anne.
thanks for having me.
It was so fun to dive into it all, like just with you and hearing it
Yeah.
all kind of flow together. It was beautiful. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And before we go, where's the
Yeah.
best place for people to connect with you online?
Okay, so the email I'll give is the Childhood Redefined email. So it's anna@childhoodredefined.com. And the Choosing Connection website, I think there's also a way to connect through there that will get to me as well. So that's probably the easiest is the Childhood Redefined.
Yeah, and don't forget there are some great articles and stuff about consensual living on
Yeah.
your website as well. So I bet people will enjoy checking that out too.
They're
Thank
old, but they're still hold up water, I think. So yeah.
Well, exactly. It's kind of a timeless thing, right? You're talking about
Yeah.
relationships and examples even from the time,
Yeah.
that really helps for people. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.